Hi again, everybody, and a good Sunday evening to you. Greg Blanchard, welcome back to another Facebook Live broadcast here on COSA TV. It's wonderful to have you joining us here this evening. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe as we continue to put a lot of time in at home with the COVID-19 crisis ongoing, but getting some signs of encouraging news at many jurisdictions across North America, and let's hope that does continue. We have a very important deadline we want to remind Ontario horse people about before we get into our show tonight, and that comes up tomorrow at midnight. Your deadline to apply for some of that relief funding that has been made available, reallocation of purse funding here in the province of Ontario. And if you haven't done so yet and you have horses eligible, make sure to fill out that application tomorrow. You have three avenues that you can go to find out more about that and to download the form here at OntarioRacing.com, COSAOnline.com, or Standardbred Canada's website as well. And the deadline, of course, tomorrow night again at midnight. So make sure to check that out. And again, we hope you are all doing well. And we want to thank COSA, the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, for making these shows possible. They have been a lot of fun to do. And we've got three wonderful guests getting set to join us here again tonight. Three of the most prominent figures when it comes to the Breeders' Crown and the Hamiltonian series of races, two of the biggest, of course, in the sport of harness racing. And we've got a poll question to pass along for you tonight in that regard, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But time to say hello to our special guests joining us, three good friends of mine, three colleagues, and three of the best people in the sport, Dave Brower, Gary Seibel, and Moira Fanning. Guys, great to have you all on board. Dave, maybe let's start with you. You're at your home in New Jersey. You've got your Hambo hat on, no doubt, hoping that, things are going to get a little bit better and we can look forward to events like that not too far down the road. But during this time, what are you doing to keep busy? I know you're an amateur chef of sorts. Any new creations that you can tell us about?
No, you know what, Greg? I usually go to some of the old standbys at this point. I haven't been all that adventurous yet. I've got a couple things in the pipeline, like a tuna noodle casserole that I've never made, or a macaroni salad and things like that. But we're doing okay food-wise. It's just a matter of getting through the day. Lots of TV. My schedule is, based on the press conferences of, our governors here in New York and New Jersey. And then a couple of nights a week, I manage a supermarket. So, am I putting myself at risk going down there to work? Yeah, I am. But so far, it's been okay. We haven't been overrun except for that first week when it was just totally crazy. So that's how I get through my day. Between that and playing with the cats, we're in good shape.
And your cat, you said, is there tonight, might make a guest appearance at some point, and great to have you with us. Moira, you're located in New Jersey as well. You're in a room. What did you tell us the story was earlier? That's your daughter's old room?
It's been made into our home office here. It's my daughter Caroline's old room. She's responsible for the paint job, and I've tried to keep a very narrow focus, so you can't see the other counterculture items in here.
How's it been for you, Moira? Obviously, a lot on your plate, a lot to consider as we move forward, administering events like the Breeders' Crown, of course, and the Hamiltonian. Can you update us as best you can as to, where things are at right now with both of those events?
Well, we're fortunate that we have a small office and one or the other of us can go in every other day. We have, of course, the April 15th payments, which are just put to bed now. I think the worst part is the not knowing when things will resume. We've had to refund the Dexter Cup and Lady Suffolk. Those were really the opening races on the road to the Hamiltonian at Freehold. Obviously, they couldn't occur. The Reynolds at Yonkers. So it has the stakes races have not been totally impacted yet, but it's all like a domino effect. We need to get started, and we need a date in mind before we can go forward. And the horses and the people are raring to go. They're training, they're racing each other at the farm. The horses are in top health. The people have been very good at all the training centers here. No sicknesses, no illness. We just need an official word to resume.
And I think horse people are more than willing, at least initially, to race without spectators. And in fact, many tracks were doing that before they ultimately shut down. The last track to shut down racing in North America, the last harness track, was Cal Expo. Gary Seibel, welcome to you from your home base. And what was that like, first of all, being the last sort of man standing when it came to standardbred tracks? And do you know what ultimately, the tipping point was to finally have to close things down for a while?
Well, it was a little bit odd to be the only harness track and one of the few tracks, thoroughbred, quarter horse, or harness, to race in North America. Maybe you feel like you have a little bit more weight on your shoulders. You want the racing to be good. You want your race calls to be good. You want everything to go well, and you want to show the audience that watching you that you are doing the right thing, social distancing wise, and making sure, at least as best as you can, that everybody is safe at the racetrack. As I was talking to all of you guys right before we started this, I mean, when I would go to the track, I would get out of my car, get to the announcer's booth without seeing one human being, and that was good for me because I was, a little concerned about the situation. My door to the announcer's booth, once I got inside, was locked, and the stewards were right next door. We did our communicating through the wall, but in the end, I think as hard as it is to completely social distance when you're talking about racehorses that have maybe a different idea about things, you want them to go one way and they want to go the other, and you need a little assistance. There were certainly times when there were people within 6 feet of each other. I don't know, in the world of racing, if there's a lot you can do about that. Coincidentally, the day that we were shut down, about an hour and a half before the program was set to begin, we were there at the racetrack when we got the word, and the people that shut us down, it was the Sacramento County Department of Health. The departments of health in Los Angeles County shut down Santa Anita, and the Department of Health in Alameda County shut down Golden Gate. Los Al is the only track that still races. I do not have the answer why. Maybe some folks out there do. There is some speculation, but it's only speculation, so I'm not about to repeat any of it here. But they are the only track still racing in California. It was a very difficult situation to be racing when almost nobody else was. But the fact of the matter is, I know for a fact, unless people were out and out lying on social media, that they were thrilled and grateful that we were, harness racing and we were still racing. But that, of course, is now water under the bridge. So.
Yeah, purely from a fan standpoint, having something to watch from home and watch and wager on, Cal Expo and other tracks were certainly filling the void at that time. So, we're all hoping sooner rather than later that we can get back, and at least there are some more positive indications, at least in some jurisdictions, to get started down that path. We've all crossed paths a long time ago. We've all had a chance to work together many times in the industry, and it's certainly been a pleasure. And might just get each of you to kind of tell folks a little bit about your background and how we all got to the point where we are now. And Dave, let's start with you. You grew up, if my information is correct, about 5 minutes from the Meadowlands, and were you kind of a fan right from day one?
Yes, I was. 5 minutes in Passaic, New Jersey, right down Route 3, as pretty much everybody knows, on their way to the TikTok diner. And the Meadowlands was the place to be. When I was growing up in my teens, there were 25,000 people there just about every, night or weekend. It was the action place to be. So it was a lot of fun. When my mother finally relented and let my dad, go bring me at night, after I was 12, 13 years old. Became a little bit of a handicapper, and we had our clique up in the clubhouse, and that's how I got started, learning to watch races and take notes and watch warm-ups and things like that. So I certainly did the handicapping part before I ever got to work in the industry. I've had every job at the track, I think, except for punch tickets and sweep the floor. I was the teletimer at one point, operating the race clock. I worked as an intern in the publicity department. I ended up getting a job to work with the Sports Eye back then, which is now DRF Harness, as a chart caller and things like that. And eventually I got the opportunity to do TV. So one thing led to another. And, that's where we stand now. Got to write a book. So I made my mother proud with that. I can always say that, I wrote a book with my journalism degree from St. John's, and we just, we relish every opportunity to broadcast when we can. Some years are good. We get multiple shows. Some years aren't. We get one show. So, it's a tough road to hoe sometimes, but it's always a lot of fun. It is a lot of pressure, but we thrive on that pressure, the three of us that you see on the screen here, including yourself.
Well, yeah, you've certainly become a fixture at the Meadowlands, and it's just you don't think of the Meadowlands now without thinking about Dave Brower. You don't think about the Breeders' Crown or Hambletonian without thinking about the name Moira Sullivan, Moira Fanning now. But you joined back in '86, right? '86. The Crown Series
No,
started in
actually, I
'84,
went to.
correct?
I was a caretaker. My first Breeders' Crown I saw as a spectator, 1985, Sportsman Park, Sandy Bowl. I had the good fortune to work at Garden State Park for Bob Quigley. First place they had 4 Breeders' Crowns, multi-format Breeders' Crowns, where I met Tom Charters. And it was a great intro into championship racing. And when Tom had an opening in his office, called me and remembered how enthusiastic I'd been about the races at Garden State and said, "Would you like a job?" Believe it or not, I actually hesitated because I loved Garden State, both worked in accounting and in the publicity department. And my husband said, "Are you out of your mind? Because as nice as Garden State Park is, it may not always be around. The Breeders' Crown will always be around." He was right, and that was 35 years ago. So championship racing, if you like horse racing, there's no better job than any of ours really to be when we get to be involved in that caliber of racing.
Yeah, you're dead on about that, and Gary Seibel, long time been the network face of harness racing, I would say, in North America, and you've done pro bowling as well, race caller. You've worked with TVG, among other things. What was your background though before all of that? What ultimately led you to make a career, for the most part, in the sport of racing?
Well, I grew up in New York City, and like a lot of us over 60 New York City natives, we were introduced to racing, whether it was Aqueduct or Belmont, and if we were lucky enough during the summer months to get up to Saratoga. And then, of course, at night, Yonkers and the late, great Roosevelt Raceway. My dad was a horse player, so he would leave work early and go. He was in a position where he could do that. And he would leave work early, pick me up, and we'd go during the day. We'd go mostly to Aqueduct. It was closer than Belmont. But that's what we did. That was my first introduction. And as a young, not even a teenager yet, quite. I mean, I think I was still maybe 12 years old, somewhere around there. Because of when I grew up, I was privileged to see such great horses like Kelso and Dr. Fager and other tremendous thoroughbreds. And of course, as I did grow up and got into my teens, then myself and some of my cronies would head out to Yonkers Raceway, because Yonkers was about a 15-minute drive from where I grew up. And that was my original introduction. We just like going to the races and having some fun and maybe getting a hot pretzel on the way out after losing a $20 bill. Always save a couple of pennies for a hot pretzel. Then going to college, I never even thought of the fact that I might get involved in this. So, I just went to Syracuse and became a journalism major, broadcasting journalism major. And ironically, those two things over the course of time wound up converging. And I was doing two things that I absolutely loved, being around the horses and horse racing, and also doing, television and writing and just being a communicator. That was coincidental when I moved to Florida in 1978. It just so happens the announcer there, a guy by the name of Jerry Glantz, was a guy that I grew up with. We were in third grade together. He was the track announcer. I saw his name in the newspaper, selections by Jerry Glantz, and I said, it's got to be the same guy, because we used to go to the track when we were teenagers. Sure enough, it was. Long story. He went to try for the Meadowlands job when they first opened, or a little after they first opened, and didn't get it, but he left Pompano Park, where I started working when I moved to Florida after, reintroducing myself to him. It left an opening in the announcer's booth, and I quickly filled it as best I could. My first year as an announcer at Pompano was the quarter horse meet in '79. I just off video, I put together a couple of race calls on tape, let the general manager, Hector Van Lennep, who was son of founder Fred Van Lennep, listen to the calls. He was okay with them. So '79 was my first meet calling quarter horses. Jerry was there for one more season. He worked the 80-81 season, the harness meet, which included Niatros on December 27th, 1980. What a night that was. And then after that season, he left. I don't think he left the business, but he just started doing a horse, brokerage, selling, buying, etc. And that left the announcer's job open for the harness meet. So I grabbed them both, and I was there till '96 as the announcer. And then there was a lot of television work that I had presented to me, and I wanted to take that. I wanted to take that opportunity to do television, and a lot of that opportunity came from Tom Charters and Moira Fanning, Moira Sullivan. Well, it was Moira Sullivan at the time, as a matter of fact. But they are largely responsible for continuing to give me the opportunity to do these great events. And I've said it many times, and I'll continue to say it. They played a big role in my success over the years.
Absolutely. Well said. We want to again welcome our guests tonight, Dave Brower, Gary Seibel, and Moira Fanning. We want to welcome you if you're tuning in tonight. Make sure to leave us comments and questions as part of the show this evening. We have a poll question, something new we're trying tonight for the first time. And here's the question we are asking. Which horse is the greatest Breeders' Crown champion of all time? And we've given you three options. Is it A, Peace Corps, B, Mac Lobel, or C, Jenna's Beach Boy? Or if you think it's someone else, you can also leave a comment in the Facebook comments section. And we'll check in with the poll results at the end of the show and see who you think is the greatest Breeders' Crown champion of all time. And many greats to choose from. And we are going to take a bit of a trip down memory lane tonight and check out some of those. So yes, the Breeders' Crown series, it all began back in 1984. And Moira, we're going to get a look at some really neat old photographs here to take us back to some of the early days of the series. Maybe just quickly set the scene for us. When you think back in the Breeders' Crown, when it started, what was the genesis? Who were some of the principals behind starting this series, and why did they think it would take off like it did?
Well, the Breeders' Cup and Breeders' Crown actually started the same year, 1984. John Gaines and Fred Van Lennep, as Gary mentioned, were good friends, and they kicked around this idea of a championship series, something to be a vehicle for sponsorship, a vehicle for television, a vehicle for promotion, and it really did take off immediately. Now, the Breeders' Cup stuck to the one venue format, and the original Breeders' Crown traveled around like the NCAA, they said, to various tracks. And that was primarily because a lot of tracks wanted to share in the format, and we wanted to go all across North America with it. We went to Edmonton, from Pompano, Chicago. And so it really was a way to bring, it wasn't simulcasting, limited simulcasting then. So it was a way to bring these races around the country. Now, I didn't work there till later, but they were very fortunate. I was in racing, as all of you were, that one of the first year matchups was Dragon Slayer defeating Annihilator. And that, if more than anything, that race made the whole series just an instant classic. I mean, it was heat racing then, believe it or not. You had to go heats and a final in the same day. And, there was the Megalodon Annihilator and the little guy Jeff Mallett training and driving Dragon's Lair, hometown at the Meadows, packed place. It was just the picture today still can give you chills if you watch the race. It was a fantastic event, and that launched the series pretty well. And I think since then, every 3 or 4 maybe have not been Breeders' Crown champions, but every horse of the year has been a Breeders' Crown champion, and it's meant a lot to the business, to the divisional champions, the year-end races, and to everything in a horse's pedigree, in its sale value. A Breeders' Crown champion is like a great brand of that's recognized throughout the industry. Same with the Hambletonian, of course, but the Breeders' Crown traveled on. I think it was Colonial Downs was the first host track to hold all 12 races at one venue. And then as tracks, the industry contracted, we went to the one night venue, or split with Woodbine. It would be 8 races and 4 races. Meadowlands was a fantastic host track partner with both events. They came up with the idea to have the Hambletonian eliminations the week before, the same day as the Breeders' Crown. So that was like that for about 12 years. But it's been a flexible format. It's maintained its high level over 35 or 36 years, which is very hard to do in this sport. And we're coming off 3 fabulous events, all with horrible weather. But Hoosier Park, Pocono, and Woodbine all put on fantastic events, and we were poised to have another one at Hoosier this year, and we still will, but the momentum, as you know, as so.
Well, it certainly attracted famous people too in the early days, Moira, and among them, the great actress Annette Funicello. Tell us the story behind this photo.
That's Los Alamitos, and they had the open pace the year before. Skipper, I believe, was there, and Annette was married to a wonderful horseman, Glenn Holt, and she was a great asset through the whole event. That's her doing the post position draw, and she was just a lovely person, and really added a little star power to Forrest Skipper's victory, I'll add.
Yeah, really, really cool scene there. No question about that. The next photo we want to look at was the youngest driver to win the Breeders' Crown, Richie Sterling Silverman. Dave Brower, maybe we'll get you to comment on this. And would you have known Richie Silverman around that time?
Probably not. I was I hadn't really established myself as working in the industry, guys. But I do remember watching Richie and his dad's horses at all times. Of course, Jerry now in the Hall of Fame. He was a brash young driver that was famous for some sometimes ill-advised aggressive moves, but every once in a while he'd win with one and just steal away from the field. He had tremendous hands and talent. And that's a great photo. I've never seen that one before, so that really brings memories back.
Yeah, and Father Jerry Silverman, a great trainer as well over the years. The next photo we want to look at, speaking of names, certainly synonymous with Breeders' Crown glory, and especially in the early years, Gary Seibel, Billy Houghton, Luke Ida, Bob Boney, big names. The best of the best came out for the Breeders' Crown.
Yeah, no question about it. As a matter of fact, preparing for this, Greg, looking back on the Hambletonian Society Breeders' Crown website and all the access you have there to the past races and the past ESPN television shows, it certainly just a wealth of memories came rushing back for me. And there was one interview that Kenny Rice did with Lou Guida. It was on the night of two of my personal favorites because I was the track announcer for both of them. It was 1988 Breeders' Crown, the 2-year-old Colt Trot and the 2-year-old Filly Trot. And that, of course, on that night was Valley Victory and Peace Corps. And Lou Guida was the owner of Peace Corps, at least one of them. He bought her for $31,000. Of course, he also had the great Mac Lobel, who he bought for $17,000, and then Annihilator as well. That one was a 6-figure purchase, but nonetheless, just a tremendous owner and a guy that really changed the sport in many, many ways. I mean, he was outspoken. He did what he wanted to do despite some naysayers, and really, I think, changed the game, at least from an ownership standpoint, and the relationship between owners who are hands-on, and particularly in this case, Lou was. Lou knew what he wanted, and he went out and he got it. And he certainly had a tremendous amount of success. You can't argue with that. And he's owned some of the greatest horses ever in the sport of harness racing. And of course, you know, the legendary Billy Houghton. I mean, you know, what can you say about him that already hasn't been said? He was a brilliant horseman. He was a tremendous father who raised more horsemen, him and his wife Dottie, and they did so much for the sport. He was the spokesperson for harness racing at a time when it was very difficult to find a horseman that could speak with just the kind of articulation that he could. And when he passed in a racing accident, the sport lost that for a little bit until, of course, John Campbell took that role.
For sure. And, you know, looking back at Lou Guida and the success he had as an owner, especially in the early years of the Crown, you know, he was kind of dominant in that category. But now as you look at the entire history of the series, Moira, one owner really has been dominant, and that's George Segal.
Yeah, George has probably, I couldn't tell you the first Breeders' Crown, but of course he had great champions like Leah Almerhurst, Delinquent Account, Brittany Farms bred some outstanding Breeders' Crown winners and dams of Breeders' Crown winners and sires of Breeders' Crown winners. George, you know, George keeps a pretty low profile, but his footprint in the sport is just immeasurable, and he's been a great support member of the Hambletonian Society. But his farm, not the biggest of farms, Brittany Farms, but it's all quality. And it shows in our standings. I was going to mention about Billy Houghton. Billy, the Houghton stable was perennially the leader in the training standings and still remains in the top 15 all-time trainers of Breeders' Crown. That's how much they dominated the early years. I don't think they've raced 2 decades, but that W.R. Houghton stable is still in those standings. And George, it's top breeder, top owner, and he'll be in the standings as long as there are standings.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. And, you know, getting back to some of the famous people that we've met over the years in the business, here's another good photo that Gary, I'm sure, will think back fondly on. There you are with Bruce Beck on the other side, your longtime broadcast partner, and Stan the Man in between. What's the background story on this photo?
Well, it was just actually, I think the pertinent question is, what's the background story on the ties? I mean, I think they were in then, boy. I'm pretty sure they were, as a matter of fact. They were both freshly watered, those ties. That's why they look as vibrant as they do. And Stan the Man as well. One of the great baseball players in the history of the game, Stan Musial. You know, we were in the winner's circle, I believe, and that's at Pompano Park, and we're doing the Breeders' Crown, and somebody says Stan Musial's there. Turn around, here's this guy in that very colorful jacket and tie, and I mean, I was awed because, you know, being a baseball fan and mostly being a Yankee fan, but nonetheless, when you meet a great baseball player, I was I was just like kind of nervous to get close to him, but Bruce sidled right up there. But, Bruce is good like that. He's always good with the photos. Speaking of my friend Bruce Beck, I am his senior, but he was, without question, my mentor when it came to learning how to prepare for a television show, live television, the magnitude of something like the Breeders' Crown or the Hambletonian. I have never seen more notes from anybody in my entire life. He was a master at that, and he has achieved great success in his career, and deservedly so. And he is responsible for a lot of the preparation techniques that I've used throughout the years. He was an invaluable source for me, and also one of my dearest friends. I mean, obviously, we haven't grown apart, but we've just grown with our own lives. And he's still in New York, and I'm on the West Coast. But I remember those special nights where you meet special people, and that was certainly one of them. Stan Musial. That's the other Stan the Man. Of course, the industry has its own, and that was the late, great Stan Bergstein, who was, in fact, my mentor.
And back in the 80s, I mean, the importance of television can't be understated, and especially when it came to harness racing. So as a young fan at the time myself, growing up in Prince Edward Island, a world away from these Breeders' Crown races, to be able to watch on network television on TSN here in Canada and watch you and Bruce work together. I mean, those were formative times for myself as a young fan, and I'm sure Dave, in the same boat at that time. And, you think about the crowds that these races drew, and we're going to take one final look at another of these old Breeders' Crown photos, which are so neat to look at. This was the crowd from 87, Dave, 87 or 88, I believe, when Mac Lobel visited Saratoga. And this was the impact of what a Breeders' Crown race with star power like that could have on a small track.
The passion for horse racing in the upstate New York community. And, right now everybody's talking about the Saratoga Thoroughbred meet and whether or not that will be allowed to proceed with or without fans. I know one thing, if they have to race those races with nobody in that ancient grandstand, it's going to break a lot of hearts. But just look at that. I wasn't there on that particular night. One of my other special nights in the sport was also at Saratoga Harness. It was the finals of a New York Sire Stakes evening, where Darlin's Delight was one of the very special performers and track record time. And there were, I'm not going to say there were this many people there that night, but there were many, many people, and there was such a buzz in the building. And, the Saratoga Harness grandstand isn't the biggest everywhere, but, when you get a lot of people combined in there, you certainly get some buzz. And that's a photo that is just unbelievable, and a tribute to a great horse. Everybody wants to come out and see a great horse, and Mac Lobel certainly was one of them.
Yeah. And my first Breeders' Crown experience in person was at Pompano Park in 1990, and got to meet Gary at that time. And what a great year to pick to be there. It was the year Arts Place set the world record that year. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. One more photo to look at, though. Moira, will let you maybe tell us the background on this one. This is Andover Hall, and no, he's not galloping out in a beautiful paddock somewhere grazing. I mean, this is there's a story behind this. We'll let you tell it.
I'm sure if Bob and Linda Stewart are watching this photo, will still make them break a sweat. He was a very talented horse, but a little unpredictable. And he had won his elimination at Woodbine, and it was Canadian Thanksgiving, I believe. And he had been turned out at a small farm, and they still don't know what happened, but he was spooked by something. He cleared about a 5.5-foot fence and took off up the 401 in the holiday traffic, and there was a family that just had a new video camera that they were playing with for their Thanksgiving holiday, and the little girl in the back was going, "Mommy, horse, and the mother was like, "Yes, dear, horse, yeah." And then right by their window went a horse, and he went a good, I want to say, almost 3 miles up the 401 on the side. And some other people had stopped. The next shot, he does come to a halt and starts grazing. Some people had stopped in their, they had some rope and a pickup truck, and they were able to catch him. And he was all right. His hooves were just worn to nubs, and scratched. But yeah, that was the incredibly lucky that he wasn't hurt and that nobody was hurt. But I think he continued to jump out of paddocks even at Hanover. I think they just gave up, built like a special paddock. Very talented horse in many ways, and of course a great sire and sire of many Breeders' Crown champions. But yeah, Andover Hall and Bruce Murray was at Woodbine then, and he had the family out. They watched the race. They, did not have Andover Hall in it, but they had a great night at the track courtesy of Woodbine, and it was really a story that ended well, thank goodness.
Well, with more than 35 years of history, some amazing stories surrounding the Breeders' Crown, and we're going to get into some replays in a moment. But first, our first trivia question of the night. And again, if you think you know the answer to any of our questions, please leave it in their comments section. We are going to draw one name randomly at the end of the show, and we'll award a $25 COSA gift card. So thanks again to COSA for that. Our first trivia question. And they're all going to be on a Breeders' Crown theme. Which horse has made the most appearances in a Breeders' Crown final? Which horse has appeared the most in a Breeders' Crown final during the course of its career? If you think you know the answer, leave it in the comment section, as we said. And we'll have a couple of more trivia questions to sprinkle in throughout the show tonight, and we will recap the answers at the end of the night. Well, let's dive into some replays first of all. And Moira, you talked about it earlier. I really think you set the scene perfectly when you talked about that first year of the Breeders' Crown, the big showdown between Nihilator and Dragon's Lair. I'm not even sure if it was billed as a showdown per se, as a showcase for Nihilator. And, in your recollection of that night, Moira, was Dragon's Lair or anyone else given a shot to beat Nihilator?
Well, I did not work there then, but Jeff Mallett certainly gave him a shot, and I think was pretty bold in his prediction that he would beat Nihilator. He didn't quite point to the outfield like Babe Ruth, but he was very confident that he belonged in that race and could take on Nihilator, and he proved to be right.
Well, here it is from 1984 at the Meadows, year one of the Breeders' Crown, and a great upset of the great Nihilator. Here's the one and only Roger Houston with the description.
Fire on the outside. 8 of the finest 2-year-old pacing colts in all of harness racing. Then pacing Dragon's Lair, going for the lead with Pershing Square. Down along the rail, Nihilator racing third. Tucking in fourth, Broadway Express. Marauder fifth. As the race around the turn, racing sixth. Whitson's Wizard. Warm Castle is seventh. Treading the field, Flight of Fire. As the race around the turn, Dragon's Lair up on the outside. Past the quarter and the fastest ever, 26-3. Into the stretch, passing a 10 of the first time. Racing second, Pershing Square. Nihilator third, Broadway Express fourth. Racing fifth, Marauder. Whitson Wizard is sixth. Warm Castle seventh. Flight of Fire trails the field. They're tightened to bunch up, going to the half. Dragon's Lair has the lead. Pershing Square second. Nihilator third. The half. 56-3. Second quarter in 30 seconds flat. Broadway Express racing fourth. Marauder fifth. Warm Castle the short route. At the rail. Down the backside. Dragon's Lair. Here comes Nihilator. On the move on the outside. Pershing Square third. Broadway Express fourth. Warm Castle fifth. Marauder sixth. 3 quarters. 1:25-1. 28-3. Dragon's Lair by 2 1/4. Nihilator on the outside. Pershing Square on the outside. Broadway Express less than an 8. It's Dragon's Lair by 2 1/2. Here comes Nihilator and Broadway Express. Dragon's Lair
the scene, Moira, looks amazing. And so again, you weren't there that year in person, correct?
No, I didn't go to
Were
work
you?
there till
Okay.
1988. But of course, that is an icon. It's a touchstone. It was truly David and Goliath's story. There were a
Yeah.
couple of Guida Houghton entries in that race, and Jeff didn't care. He just went down the road and said, "It's mine." Horse to back it up.
And Dave, as a young fan at the time, I'm sure you followed those races closely. Do you remember your thoughts when you heard or maybe watched at that time Annihilator get upended?
Believe that he could get beat, so to speak. He has been such an invincible performer. I had the pleasure of actually being part of a Harness Horse Youth Foundation camp that summer, which was run by Steve Wolf down in Florida and former director of publicity at Freehold. And one of our stops on that memorable Saturday afternoon was Annihilator in his stall at the Meadowlands with 2 armed guards on each side holding guns. You know, that's the kind of security they had around a horse like that. But to get away from that, you know, when you watch a race like that and you just shake your head and you say, oh my God, how good, you know, was Jeff Mallett's horse that day? He got stung hard as any horse could possibly get to the first quarter. He finally was able to cross over. He stole maybe 1/8 of a mile there in the middle of it, and then somehow still had plenty left to scoot away from the field. You know, it truly was one of the greatest upsets in the history of our sport.
Yeah, no
The
question.
second
And
heat.
what a way. Sorry, go ahead, Moy.
I said, and it was the second heat.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that, you know, that's something that I had forgotten about, to be honest. And how many years did they have that format?
They had it for quite some time. I want to say into the late 80s. And then the tracks sort of wanted to make an event out of it and have a week when we went to the multi-race format, etc. So and heat racing was slowly falling out of favor with trainers and owners. So it made more sense to have them the week before, but as Dave said, I mean, 26 3/4 in 1984.
Yeah.
It is
Parked.
being stung.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that is the way a lot of stake racing was conducted. If there was enough entries, they went heats and a final. So we did that up until, I want to say 89. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look. So.
And you just couldn't map out a better start for the Breeders' Crown Series than having something like that happen, and it really seemed to springboard the series, and it really hasn't looked back since. And when you think about the overall history of the Breeders' Crown, certain names pop up as being synonymous with the series, and I think one of those, Gary Seibel, you would agree, is the name Peace Corps. You know, one of the all-time greats when it comes to this series.
No question about it. I mean, I was very fortunate to be the track announcer at Pompano right from the onset of the Breeders' Crown Series. I've called horses like Peace Corps, Mac Lobel, Valley Victory, Esquire, Spur, Goalie Jeff, Delphi's Lobel. I mean, a ton of, you know, top horses of their era for sure, and names like Mac Lobel and Peace Corps just stand out throughout time. You know, I was very fortunate to be in that position to call those Breeders' Crown races with those horses, both 2 and 3 for Mac Lobel. He won at Pompano, and I think 59 and 1 at 2. And then, of course, the world record at 3, he won by a dozen lengths maybe in 54 and 1. So, again, it was an absolute thrill for me, and one of those thrills was Peace Corps. But real quickly, Annihilator story, because Annihilator was in the Houghton barn, and a good buddy of mine, Cammy Houghton, one of the Houghton boys there, we used to go out and, you know, just hang out a little bit after the races and such. And I'd stop at the barn as much as I could. And I remember going over to Annihilator's stall. It was me and Cammy. Nobody was in there. And he says, "This is Annihilator." And I just started walking in. And that horse came after me like nobody's business. I couldn't get out of there quick enough. My heart was pounding. And then Cammie says to me, yeah, nobody really gets along with him except for his groom. And that was scared the life out of me. But that, some of those great ones are like that. Annihilator was, at least he was to me. Maybe it was personal, but I'm not really sure. Peace Corps, though, a real doll and a true superstar. And I got to call her 2-year-old Breeders' Crown in 1988, again, owned by Lou Gaida and his people. She was part of a 3-horse Gaida entry back in 1988.
And at that time, Baltic Speed was the big trotting stallion, and he had a couple of the heavyweights coming into the Crown finals that year. Peace Corps was certainly one of them. We're going to have a look at the replay now, and we'll let you listen to Gary back at his time in the announcer's booth at Pompano Park. Here he is with the call of that 88 2-year-old filly trot.
Hitter moves closer fourth. Express Courier fifth. You've Got a Friend is sixth, followed by Peach Pit, and far back that is Armbro Hillary. No change by the stands. They trot to the half. It's CD Cash, and she controls it a little more than a length. In second, that is Park Avenue Kathy, and now Peace Corps begins to roll on the outside. Half win in 58 3/5. 2-year-old filly trotters on to the backstretch. Here's the battle. It's ED Cash, and now Peace Corps is drawn on even terms on the outside. Those two battle it out right behind them. Park Avenue Kathy trotting third. Arbro Hitter now going up fourth. Express Courier fifth, followed by Peach Pit. You've Got a Friend shoots the gap at the rail. Arbro Hillary far back as they race into the final turn. Peace Corps now by half a length. ED Cash keeping her parked out. Park Avenue Kathy third, and now Arbro Hitter moves a closer fourth. 3/4, 1:27 4/5. They are on a record pace as they hit the top of the lane, and now Peace Corps stormed off by 3. On the inside, ED Cash, Arbro Hitter, but Peace Corps looking strong to the wire. She's marching on into the record books. Peace Corps now captures the Breeders' Crown and becomes the richest 2-year-old filly trotter in the history of the sport. Oh, what a mile. Peace Corps in 1:57 1/5.
Absolute Breeders' Crown royalty. Peace Corps 57-1, big mile on a 5/8 track for back in 1988, and nice to have a look back at that. And we're going to have a look at our next trivia question next. And this one on a Breeders' Crown theme, of course. Jimmy Takter, Ronnie Burke, Bob McIntosh, your top 3 when it comes to trainers in the money-winning department in the history of the Breeders' Crown. We want to know who sits 4th in the Breeders' Crown trainer standings by money won. So again, if you think you know the answer, shoot us a comment, and we will recap all the question and answers at the end of the show. We're going to draw one winner at random at the end of the show from all of the correct answers. We had a question from one of our viewers as well. We want to thank you. And we'll, I think, put this to all 3 of you. I think it was directed at Dave, and we'll start with him. But we maybe ask all 3 of you. Dave, have you ever asked Ken Workington about his experiences at Old Home Week, and specifically the Gold Cup and Saucer? And has it ever made you think about wanting to come sometime?
It's a bucket list item, no doubt about that, Greg. He's told me about the stories about how well he gets taken care of by the good folks up there, at Red Shores and things like that. I've always tuned in to him and his broadcast wherever I am at that point, whether I'm, at my buddy's lake house or at the pool or, at home and things like that. It's a bucket list trip for sure, and I do hope to make it someday. It's probably not going to be this year because the way we're going right now with racing and these dates, we're racing well past Hambletonian Day at the Meadowlands once we go back. So, I don't know if I can make it this year, but I will someday. And I just want to have some PEI muscles in PEI because I'm the foodie guy.
Sure. Well, Gary, I know you're a big seafood guy, and last year after the Hambo, you were going to stick around and do some clamming, so I'm sure you'd like to venture to PEI at some point.
Yeah, no question about it. And it got me to thinking, I just read a story today about Wally Hennessy and his brother Dan, natives of PEI, and Dan, unfortunately, had to head back home, suffering from blindness, a tough situation. But I've never been there. I absolutely would love to go. Whatever, I repeat what, Dave said there, that would be a bucket list type of item for me. It's not going to happen this year, but I certainly hope it happens in the future. And yes, I am a seafoodie. I'm pretty much a foodie, period. I see food and I eat it. Yes, I'm on the seafood diet. Yes.
And Moira, have you been? I should know this. I'm not sure if you've ever been to.
Yeah, like Dave, it's a bucket list item, but I have not been yet.
All right. Well, we'll all have to plan a trip sometime when this all gets behind us. Let's go back and continue with our look back at the Breeders' Crown from yesteryear, and to that same year, 1988. Peace Corps came in. She was the heavyweight in the 2-year-old filly trot division, Gary. And on the colt side, there was one that had credentials that matched her at the time, and his name was Valley Victory.
Yeah, even though his record didn't necessarily show it, I think he had only won 3 of 6 starts and had the least money in the field, if I remember correctly, earned. But after you saw his performance in the Breeders' Crown 2-year-old colt trot, I mean, you couldn't help but think, here is a future superstar, if not a current future star. He was a superstar. He was just unbelievable for Billy O'Donnell there. It was a good field. It included Probe, who went on the very next year to finish in the only Hambletonian dead heat in history, along with Park Avenue Joe, Osvaldo Formia, the trainer of Probe. Probe didn't fare well in that 2-year-old colt trot in 1988, but of course a Hambletonian winner the next year. And Baltic Speed, who was the first winner at the in 1984 in the event that was the one that kicked off at Pompano Park. He became the first Breeders' Crown winner to sire a Breeders' Crown winner, and that winner was Peace Corps in 1988. Then he does it right again in the same night with Valley Victory.
Yeah, incredible. The Magic Man, Bill O'Donnell, at the lines on this particular night, and the end result would be a world record performance as well. Here's a flashback to that 1988 2-year-old colt trot final.
Right there fourth. On the inside, it's Cobra Lobel, followed on the outside by London Hunt, Probe, and far back on the trot is Flying Irishman. They wheel around the clubhouse third. Kaiser Lobel in control, and he's got up by 2. On the inside, second of that is Speed Sailing, and now Ziggy Hanover first to move, going up first over the half in a minute and 1/5. Field of 2-year-old trotting colts now on to the backstretch. Kaiser Lobel pours it on. He's got up by 2. Ziggy Hanover steadily closing ground on the outside. Speed Sailing content to sit at the rail third. Valley Victory now into the outside flow. He's second over 4th. On the inside, Cobra Lobel trotting 5th. London Hunt is 6th. Probe 7th. Far back, Flying Irishman heading to the 3/4 pole. Kaiser Lobel has been unchallenged throughout. Ziggy Hanover now ranges up on the outside. Right there, Speed Sailing has had the perfect trip third. 3/4, 129 flat. That third quarter, 28-4. And as they hit the top of the lane, Kaiser Lobel, but they're all coming to him now. Valley Victory tipped 3 wide, and Billy O'Donnell's got plenty of horse. Here he comes with him now. Valley Victory, the outside, storms to the front, and he's drawing clear. Ziggy Hanover, Cobra Lobel, but it's all Valley Victory in front in 1:58 and 1/5.
And Valley Victory has done it.
And we know what Valley Victory went on to do ultimately as a stallion, Dave Brower. But it's neat to look back and see him in action, and you realize what a great 2-year-old he was. Not a real big guy, but boy, as you can see, he had the gait and an impressive turn of foot. Not shocking to see he would go on and have the impact in the stallion barn that he ultimately did.
Yes, he did, and so many legendary stories about trainer Steve Elliott working his way to get Valley Victory to show the natural talent that he had. It wasn't always there and apparent right from the beginning, but once they figured him out, as you can see, he could storm by a field, he could brush to the front and just jog away. He was a tremendous champion too.
And I always loved the Breeders' Crown races at Pompano. We got to showcase the best of the best under really nice weather conditions. That was a big thing for me. Moira, when you look back,
Yeah.
when you look back, especially when you think about recent years and the weather, you must miss those days.
Oh, I do, and it was just a natural setting, as you say. Everyone shipped south for the winter, and that kicked off the winter season there. I'm going to say that was 88, 88, and there were eliminations for that race the week before. So I remember we were kind of scandalized in the press box because Bill O'Donnell and John Campbell had opted to drive in the Governor's Cup final rather than qualify those two horses for the Breeders' Crown. And if I remember, I think Steve might have driven and Tom out. I mean, it didn't matter. Those two horses were two tremendously talented horses. As you said, Valley Victory kind of set you were looking at the trotter of the future there with a low balanced head and the gait more like a pace than a trot at that time. And those two were two forerunners. Of course, Peace Corps came back to be the only four-time champion in 36 years of Breeders' Crown. You know, one dominant 2-year-old, dominant 3-year-old, dominant 4-year-old, dominant 5-year-old. It's just an incredible. She came back, I think, from Europe twice to win the Breeders' Crown. That in itself is a remarkable thing. So those Pompano races showcased some great champions. The weather was always nice, you're right. And we had Alan Finkelson, John Cashman. Stan Musial was just one of many celebrities that Alan or his friend George would bring around to the races. So it was a great event host venue, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the great weather. It wasn't always ideal, though. And Gary, I think you would admit that on the night in 1990 when Arts Place set the Breeders' Crown record, and the world record at the time, that, I mean, it looks nice when you watch it on TV, but the winds, people that weren't there can't appreciate how dramatic they were that night.
Well, it's interesting, and Moira, if I'm wrong about this, I think it was the only time that we have ever done the live show for the Breeders' Crown inside, in a room. I think that was the year that we did it. It was Bruce, myself, and of course Stan Bergstein, and we actually did it from the harness riders room at Pompano Park. It was the first year that I did not call the races because starting in 1990, I devoted myself exclusively to doing the ESPN shows, and Kurt Becker came in that year and did a sensational job, and he had some sensational racing, including Arts Place as a 2-year-old. It was a windy night, really bad, and I believe that's why the decision was made to put the three of us inside upstairs. I mean, this where we were was higher than the announcer's booth, up on the level with the photo finish, off in a little corner, and that's where we did the show from. And it was absolutely weird because it just, you know, and Dave will tell you this, there's nothing, you have to be there. You have to be on the scene with the action. Doesn't matter how crowded, how hot, how humid. You have to have all those people surrounding you all the time, all the fans. You have to hear that. And we didn't hear that. So it really, I think, took away a little bit from our performances. They might have been a little bit flat. I'll just speak for myself. But it was the strangest thing ever to do a show inside where you were so removed from all the action. But it was because of the windy conditions, which made Arts Place's world record performance even more amazing.
I would agree. I would use the term. Go ahead, Moy.
I said your recollection is absolutely right.
Wow, that shocks me, though. How amazing that it is.
Yeah. And anyone that knows me, I've talked about this race over the years so many times, and I use the term mind-boggling, as Gary said. You couldn't comprehend it. You had to be there. And we've shown it a couple of times on the show before, but I think it's worth another look. Here is that 1990 victory by Arts Place. We'll pick it up going to the first turn off a 53 2/2 mile, unheard of times for that back in 1990. die laughing, unfortunately, on the outside looking in at this point. And here's Kurt Becker with the call.
Along the rail, 5 right behind him comes Storm and Jesse, 6-man teeth, 7 free flow, they're in the final turn. Racing 8 Happy Family, 9 Stand and Deliver, 3/4 1:23, the world record very much within reach. And Arts Place is on top now by 4 lengths as Die Laughing fades to the field. Racing second, Tudor Scooter, and Arts Place is a full in the stretch. They turn for home. Tudor Scooter a distant second. On the outside, Storm and Jesse third. An incredible performance after carving a front quarter in 26 and 2, a half in 53 and 2. Arts Place wins in 1:51, 1/5. There is the world record. There is the fastest 2-year-old pacer in the history of the sport, the fastest 2-year-old ever, and he does it on a 5/8.
And that was an all-age track record at the time at Pompano Park. And Moira, you talked about Valley Victory, how he likely revolutionized the sport as a stallion. And I thought we were looking at the second coming here when I watched Arts Place on this night. I could not believe what I was seeing. And it was great to see him go on and do ultimately, not next year, but as a 4-year-old, what we all thought he could do. Oh, I don't think she caught that. But yeah, just incredible to watch.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I did catch it. You're right. And again, the horse that can put together 3 years like he did, like Arts Place did, that I think Tom Charters used to always tell me, Delvin Miller said, the fastest horse will always be a 2-year-old because they don't know their limitations. They feel great. They're not sore, etc. And Arts Place certainly proved that axiom true. He ran into a bunch of buzzsaws as a 3-year-old, still had a very good year. And then as a 4-year-old went undefeated. I think it was 12 for 12. But those things just rarely happen in racing. And very special animal, Arts Place.
And we'll ask you, Dave, back at the time of the Breeders' Crown, Arts Place and Die Laughing on paper were very close. They had, both had excellent campaigns going into that. So a lot of people thought, this is a real showdown. What were your recollections from back at that time?
Well, the thing about great horses is you need another great horse to push you to moments like that. And in Arts Place's 3-year-old season, he performed, what arguably is one of the most memorable and epic Little Brown Jugs of all time, with overcoming an impossible trip and things like that. So the fact that he could keep that level of performance and be pushed by other true great horses like Die Laughing is a credit to, his own career. And, he went on to be, a super sire too. So, there's nothing more you can say about a colt like that. And he gave it all. He gave it all every time. And he didn't need his trip, and he would somehow find a way to win. And great horses find ways to win even when they're not at their best.
Briefly, just speaking of being at your best, there was another horse in that race that went on to, for a long time, hold the record for the fastest mile, not a race mile, but fastest mile. Cam Best was in that field, trailed throughout most, and he time trialed in 46 and 1. That mark stood for a long time. That was an excellent field, and Arts Place just wiped them out completely.
He certainly did. And when Arts Place was at the top of his game, it was like watching a machine. He was just poetry in motion. Again, the 3-year-old season, a little bit inconsistent. He ran into some real Bearcats at age 3. He wasn't quite at the top of his game, so it ended up being a little bit of an underwhelming campaign for him. But at 4, he started to dominate again, and in fact went undefeated. And we're going to show now the 4-year-old Breeders' Crown, or the Breeders' Crown at age 4, the older pace that year. This is when Arts Place was thoroughly dominating the best older pacers in the sport. We'll pick it up at the half, 57-1, and on this night, it's lights out. He will turn on the afterburners and look as impressive as ever. Here's Frank Salive with the call.
Outside 5. Cam Luck is on the outside 6. Odds against is 7th. Arts Place has nobody to within an open length of him. Cross County from 2nd. Broussard on the outside 3rd. Ultra Jet is 4th. Then 5th Arcane Hanover. 3 wide 6 goes Cam Luck. The 3rd marker in 1:24.4. That was a 27-3 backstretch for Arts Place. And Arts Place is an 1/8 of a mile away from 15 in a row this year and a 2nd Breeders' Crown. Arts Place is looking truly invincible. Another amazing sight. He's pouring it on under wraps. Arts Place wins the Breeders' Crown in 1:52. Broussard staged for 2nd. Cam Luck was 3rd.
15 for 15.
I don't know about you, Gary. I could watch Arts Place replays all night long. He was fun to watch.
You know, you said it before, Greg. He looked like an absolute machine. This horse was unbelievable. And, you know, his gait just strong and fluid. And again, he just, you know, completely annihilated a good field of horses there. And, you know, after an up and down 3-year-old season, there was no question that he was just the best harness horse in the sport at that time.
And at this point in his career, he was in the care of Bob McIntosh. Of course, Gene Regal had him as a 2- and 3-year-old. And boy, you talk about trainers that for a window there in the 80s and 90s, you had just a powerhouse colt after colt in his barn, Gene Regal, Moira, and another of those names that has become synonymous with Breeders' Crown success over the years.
It's, again, Bob, I think, won his first Breeders' Crown in 1980. It was Sunset Warrior. It was a Garden State. And then he had 2 horses in last year at Woodbine, you know, Mohawk Park, and finished 4th with both of them. The guy is just a remarkably consistent, remarkably talented horseman. Plus, he's a funny guy. And so he has... He had, so we were always delighted when he had a horse in the Breeders' Crown, not only because it was usually some great champion that we were going to see, but he was personable, he was funny, he would share, very honest about his horses. And, you know, back then we had a large publicity team. We were so fortunate to have a fledgling cable station called ESPN, could buy all the time you wanted. I think to go around the country and have 12 hours on ESPN on various Friday nights, just a television exposure that really was unprecedented. We were able to keep that up, I think, about till the year 2000, 2001, when there were so many other sports and too expensive and too crowded. But Bob is almost like a 5th member of the broadcast team there, or of the Breeders' Crown team, because if you saw Bob, you knew it was a Breeders' Crown.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned, too, was the fact that you were able to go around to the different venues back in the 80s and 90s. You wanted to really showcase the series to tracks that otherwise maybe wouldn't host a marquee event of that stature. And in 1992, the Breeders' Crown ventured to Northfield Park in Cleveland, Ohio. And Gary maybe set the scene for the 3-year-old colt Pace that year. It was expected to be kind of a coronation for the great Western Hanover, but a colt named Kingsbridge had other ideas.
Well, you know, that's what happens sometimes. I think back on, I think it was the year that Kurt Becker called in 90 with Arts Place. I think it was Bay's Fellow that year. At that time, the longest shot in Breeders' Crown history, if I can recall. You know, somebody may be more qualified to talk about Kingsbridge in 92 at Northfield Park. I think 92 might have been a senior moment year for me, so I'm not quite sure I can recall that, but maybe somebody can better than me.
Who drove Kingsbridge? Was it Roger Mayotte?
Roger Mayotte, there you go. Kevin Banting, the trainer. And you had Survivor Gold on the rail that night, and you know, a lot of speed.
Anybody hearing Greg?
Can you
You
hear me,
know,
guys?
we went to Northfield with, which was another fabulous host track, but unfortunately with two odds-on favorites for their races, So Fresh and Western Hanover, and it was, I'm not going to say it was a foregone conclusion. So Fresh won easily. Plus, it snowed, and it was only October, and it was freezing.
That
Yeah, and Kingsbridge did not get the script. Roger Mayotte did not did not realize that and down the pike they went, and it was a tremendous moment. I think the owners were still up. They were in shock, and luckily they got down there. But yeah, that was an incredible upset.
So the year 1992, again, Northfield Park, as Moira mentioned, there was some snow in the air that night, but it did not stop Kingsbridge from pulling the big upset over Western Hanover. Here is a look back to that Breeders' Crown Championship in the 3-year-old colt pace division.
Announcer Greg Young.
They're in the stretch, and here they come for the 1992 Breeders' Crown 3-year-old colt pace. They're on their way. Survivor Gold first away along the rail. Draws out as that lead 3/4 of a length as they go in the clubhouse turn. Bullvon's Dream second. Western Hanover a quick third. And around the turn they go as they race for the backside. It's Survivor Gold out on top, a length and a quarter. Bullvon's Dream second, a length and a half. Western Hanover's there third. Kingsbridge sets fourth. Coming away fifth is Humstinger. Then it's Bow-Nose Jake Crouch, the early trailers, Lawful Hanover. They're single file racing to the quarter-mile mark. Survivor Gold cutting that pace, leads over there a length and a half in 27 4/5 seconds. In the far turn the first time. As they pace around to the top of the stretch, Bullvon's Dream is still sitting second, a length and a quarter. Western Hanover is there third, a length. Looking to the outside, Kingsbridge. Along the inside is Humstinger. Then comes Bow-Nose Jake Crouch and Lawful Hanover. In the stretch they come as they promenade down to the halfway point of the race. For running that field, it's Survivor Gold. Is out there a length and 3/4. Bullvon's Dream is second. Now on the outside, here comes Western Hanover. Kingsbridge moving up on the outside fourth. And on the rail, Humstinger, the half, 56 4/5. And around the club turn they go in her payoff half mile. As they head for the backside, Survivor Gold has that little length. In on the rail, Bullvon's Dream second. On the outside, Western Hanover third. Up off the rail, Kingsbridge is fourth. It's Humstinger fifth. Along the outside, Bow-Nose Jake with Crouch and Lawful Hanover. They're over at the 3/4 mile mark of the race. It's Dave Wall and Survivor Gold. They're out there 3/4. 1:25 1 on the turn. They're swinging and winging as they head for home. Out on top of that field, Survivor Gold. Western Hanover challenging along the outside. Right there, a close-up third, Bullvon's Dream. Kingsbridge to the outside, 3 wide, and out cranking up is Bow-Nose Jake. In the stretch they come. They're out 4 wide on a drive for the wire. Under the whip, fighting to hold it. Survivor Gold gives it up. Western Hanover takes over. Flying on the outside. Here comes Kingsbridge. On the outside, Bow-Nose Jake. What a finish for the Breeders' Crown 3-year-old colt pace in 1:54 4.
So a big upset winner in the Breeders' Crown.
Great race, and Western Hanover, for as great a racehorse as he was, Dave Brower, he had some hard luck in some of the big races. Of course, upended in the Little Brown Jug and this year, and not for lack of effort here in this Crown final.
No, that's true. I mean, that's a big effort there, grinding up first over on the half-mile track. And then he just about inherited the lead when they turned for home as the front end kind of gave it up. Bill Fay doing just about everything he can but get out and push. And Kingsbridge, what a nice trip that was from Roger Mayotte, and he was able to just uncork that one last surge to get up at the wire. And we've seen so many finishes like this in the history of the Breeders' Crown. It's why it's so special to all of us. Some of them are upsets. Some of them are, predicted results. And, anybody who cashed a ticket on them that day, I hope they went out and had a nice dinner that weekend. I'll tell you what, that was one big, big, big upset.
And there was something about Roger Mayotte and the Breeders' Crown at Northfield Park. He upset in 1995 as well with a horse called That'll Be Me, big upset at the time. So he certainly had some history, and especially at that particular venue, which is interesting. And again, just part of the great Breeders' Crown tradition. When the event comes north of the border, again, weather conditions can be a factor late in the year. And this year, we're going to go back and look now at His Majesty in 1996. It was sloppy track conditions that night, and it might have helped him ultimately as he got away to a slow start. We're going to look at that in a moment. But again, when you think of the great connections over the years, Moira, some of the great Canadian connections in the Crown Series, Doug Brown and Stu Ferlot had a lot of great moments together.
Crown Pro, I think she was the first pacing winner to repeat, and Doug Brown, they made a great team, horseman and driver, and didn't matter where the Breeders' Crown was then, whether it was in Pompano or up in Canada. They had tremendous success. Headline Hanover, as you see, His Majesty, I think that was the same night, maybe. But yeah, Stu and Doug were a formidable duo.
And this is one of the most impressive performances, in my opinion, in the history of the Crown. He's still dead last, and we're going to let Frank Salive describe the final half.
Majesty at the rear of the field, trying to put on the 3-wide move, and he is gaining. Stone Dragon past the top turn in 125 flat, 27-4 third quarter. They come 4 high at him out of the final turn. Gothic Dream, His Majesty last most of the way, is readying to join. Megamind is on the outside, joining the pace. They turn into the stretch. The 96 Cadillac Breeders' Crown final, and here comes His Majesty. Is it going to be a last to first victory for Doug Brown and Stu Ferlot? Yes! His Majesty, Doug Brown, Stu Ferlot score again over Gothic Dream, and Megamind was third. His Majesty sweeps the field to win the Cadillac Breeders' Crown in 154-4.
His Majesty returning 12.
Incredible. Paid $12.60 that night, and in hindsight, a very good price when you consider the way he did it, Dave Brower. You rarely saw that, right, in a Breeders' Crown where a horse can be sitting last with just over a quarter of a mile to go and get there.
Well, not at that level, Greg. I mean, it's so hard to make up ground, especially, nowadays we refer to these horses being much better bred and much faster with all the equipment and things like that. But you never know what a track bias can do on a particular night. And I guess that was definitely the case on that particular night. He didn't just move 3 wide, he moved 4 wide, and he was 4 wide around the entire last turn. It's so hard to maintain that kind of momentum, going those speeds. But, that was a great performance, and now I understand why that's one of your personal favorites. It makes sense to me because, I hadn't thought about or seen that race in a very, very long time, but boy, what a special show it was.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got one more Breeders' Crown replay to look at in a moment, but our final trivia question of the night coming up next. And if you've been listening closely tonight, you would have heard the answer somewhere along the way. But here is the question for you. We want to know the only horse to win 4 Breeders' Crown titles. So again, giving you a hint, we did mention it earlier on tonight's broadcast. So if you're paying close attention, you should know the answer, and leave your answers for us in the comments section. Again, we've got a poll question happening tonight as well, wanting to know from you who you think the greatest Breeders' Crown champion of all time is. And I believe at this point in time, Mac Lobel is holding a narrow lead in our poll, but we will recap that at the end of the show. One of the favorite Breeders' Crown moments for Dave Brower came in 2001. The open trot, and we've seen it a few times over the years where you get that international field assembled, and there was no greater trotter at that time than Varenne, and certainly added a whole other element to that year's event.
A lot of things during that particular day, Greg. First of all, the purse of that Breeders' Crown was $1 million. There were 3, I think, $1 million Breeders' Crown open trots in its history, and this was one of them. But when you deal with an international horse shipping into North America to compete, you don't know what you're looking at. I'd seen some tape. I had seen this. I had seen that. Varenne's driver was Gianpaolo Minucci, and I'll never forget Bob Hayden in the post-race interview, trying to talk to him through, a cousin or an interpreter or something like that. It was just one of those incredible moments. But our broadcast position that day was right next to the winner's circle, right at the finish line. That's where they put the desk, and it was me, and Bob Hayden and Ken Workington up in the booth, I guess. But to watch the crowd that particular day was unlike any other moment that I ever experienced. There were thousands of people that came to this event at the Meadowlands, many of them from Italy. They all had flags that they were waving around. They were screaming Forza Varenne. I'd never heard the word Forza before, but now, then I learned Forza Varenne, and he put on a performance that was so special, just dominating North America's best, that, to this day, I'll never forget it. It was one of my most special Breeders' Crown moments.
All right, let's take a look now at that 2001 Breeders' Crown, and we'll come back and chat more about it in a moment.
27 4/5 down the backstretch. Here comes Varenne on the outside, and he just leisurely strolls to the front here for Giampaolo Minucci. Varenne has taken over down the backstretch. The heavy favorite leads the way. Nicky Colcold's now second. Here comes Campbell making a move now with Dream Vacation, charging up on the outside for America. As Plesac vacates the cones and tries to go up fourth on the outside. Magician is now fifth on the rail, followed by Fool's Goal. Then it's Anklet, Hanover, and on the inside, Monty Hall. At the back of the pack is Count the Goal and Dr. Ronarail, and Campbell took charge with Dream Vacation off a half of 55-1, but Minucci is back out to challenge with Varenne, so the battle is on. Dream Vacation on the inside, Varenne on the outside, taking it to him. Here comes Plesac charging up on the outside for Eric Ledford and the state of Illinois. As dropping back now, Nicky Colcold. Magician trying to shake loose between horses. Miller's trying to get him going here. 123 for 3/4 in the stretch drive. Here comes Varenne. Varenne is taken over under minimal urging here. It's Varenne now on the outside. Plesac as Ledford is rocking, whipping, driving him. On the inside, Dream Vacation trying to hold on for Miners Bulls, but it's Varenne, the Italian stallion, Grandioso Cavallo. And he becomes the first European horse to win the Breeders' Crown. 151-1 for Varenne from Italy into the Big M winner's circle. 433, $646.
Yeah, that was impressive, to say the least.
From our microphone near the winner's circle, that's how loud it was that it made that microphone. And his performance was so special, and you heard it in Ken Workington's call. This is something that established not a routine, but a future way for these European stars to come to the North America and race in these big races. Last year, Bold Eagle, the great Commander Crow. Well, it all started with Varenne. And that was back in 2001, for $1 million. And it was, look at the winner's circle celebration. Look at how happy these people are. It's unbelievable.
And it really adds such a different element, a different twist to the Breeders' Crown. Moira, from your perspective, in your role as a longtime publicity director, what did it mean when you had this international flavor? Another example was the year Sandpail won on Canadian soil with the European invaders coming in. It's just a completely different dynamic.
Yeah, and actually, I think we had Tail Jet first, and he didn't do very well. But that was part of what makes a win like that so extraordinary. Is it's a grueling trip over here. They have to be in quarantine. They have to, be different, away from other horses. And I remember it was a very hot summer when Varenne won. He was down in New Egypt at a farm. It's a lot to overcome, and it's certainly the measure of a great horse when they shrug off those minor inconveniences like European travel and quarantine, etc., and pull off a mile like that. Commander Crow, same thing with him. And Sandpail, I think we had both Rapide LaBelle. And I got to tell you, my personal favorite up till now was Varenne. But I think Bold Eagle erased that last year. I was so excited to see him, and he was a champion, maybe not quite at the top of his game as he had been in recent years, but still, a horse with an incredible resume, an incredible person, a great team. He was as we all saw, gave Brian Sears, a real workout in the post parade. He was an X factor though, still, but his greatness held out. And those, as Dave says, when you get a little bit of an unknown, even today, when you can watch races internationally, etc., you don't know what you're getting. We watch race week in, week out. We're rarely surprised by their efforts or etc. But to see horses like that come over, and Varenne did come with an incredible entourage. And imagine back then in the year 2000, people flew from Italy just to watch him. He raced again up in Montreal. He was a star, just like a soccer star or a football star or whatever. He was a real star. And I said,
he certainly
I felt so
earned
bad.
it.
I heard that race call because I heard them say Anklet Hanover. That poor mare, 4 years old, supplemented into that race. Can you imagine supplementing in against Varenne?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, he earned the respect of North Americans if he didn't already have it before that, and it's kind of neat when it goes the other way too, right, Moira? When Europeans, look at our champions, and an example was Mac Lobel. He went over there, and he's revered to this day there. So it's just a kind of a mutual worldwide respect for these superstars.
Well, it's nowhere more evident than Moneymaker, who, again, we're focusing on trotters here, but she had the misfortune, you might say, to be born the same year as Continental Victory, and I don't know if we're going to ever get to it, but she was beaten as the solid favorite. A terrible, still wince when I think about it, at Vernon Downs, her hometown. That was when her owners had just sold her to the Antonacci Group. But after that, she rarely, she won on every continent, every race, just an absolutely incredible trotter. So she was another trotter that was shared both by internationally and domestically. And that's the best in the world, when we can share our horses like that.
Absolutely. Well, since we're talking trotters, let's switch gears and talk Hambletonian, the other major race that is administered, of course, by the Hambletonian Society. Gary and Dave, you've been bringing it to us via CBS for the last number of years. Absolute pleasure for me to get to join you guys on that broadcast the last couple of years. And it's an incredible day. There is nothing else like it in the sport. We're going to take a little trip down memory lane now, and some photos to take us back to the history a little bit. First of all, when the race switched venues to the Meadowlands, Moira, back in 1981. So I believe this photo is from the first year at the Big M, correct?
Yes, yeah. That was the first year it moved from Du Quoin. There was a big campaign, big push by the Meadowlands. They promised a lot of improvements to the race, and it was a hard decision for the society, because it was always a race for America's heartland, Du Quoin, the fairgrounds, and they were worried it would lose a little bit of its specialness. The Meadowlands did a great job. I do have to say, I'm not sure how thrilled the society was. It rained, it was muddy, and a gelding won. A gelding who had been in claimers, I think, about 5 starts back. That wasn't quite what it had been there, but it went on from there. And as I said, the Meadowlands couldn't have done a better job with it throughout the years, and it remains the apex race.
Yeah, so not the start for the crown at the Meadowlands that the Breeders' Crown had at the Meadows back in 1984, but nonetheless, the rest is history, as they say. Gary Seibel, so many great storylines over the history of the Hambletonian. We're going to have a look at our next photograph. And, when you think of historic moments, this is certainly one of the biggest ones, the dead heat.
Wow.
Yeah, 1989, Park Avenue Joe and Probe. It was just phenomenal. I mean, the photo was out for a long time, and Tom Durkin said, too close to call. And that was exactly right. I mean, it was a spectacular day, and it was kind of neat to see to be a part of the first dead heat and the only dead heat in Hambletonian history. I remember that day well. They had just a large, tremendous crowd on hand at the Meadowlands, as they always did. Anywhere 35, 40, 45,000 people at the track. And to have it end this way was just spectacular.
For sure. And Dave Brower, will maybe let you comment on our next photo that we're going to have a look at. This was one of the great moments in Hambletonian history as well. Mal Burrows, Jimmy Takter, wife Christina, and they're celebrating Malabar Man's win.
Wow, that was a special one too. Malabar Man, who was the lucky beneficiary of an opening up the inside. Tron Smedshammer had the lead in that race, turning for home, and Mal Burrows was kind of locked in the pocket, or so it looked. Finally, a little daylight emerged, and he came charging through to win. Back to Park Avenue Joe and Probe. That's one of those moments where, like, you remember where you were on that particular day. Well, I was the teletimer of that race. So I started and stopped the clock. So I'm in the same booth with the photo finish guy, who's a dear friend named Charlie Richmond. And when they hit the wire in that race, I'm obviously right on the finish. I looked over at Charlie and I said, I think we got a problem, because I knew it was 1 inch either way, if not a dead heat. And we were in walkie-talkie like communication, with the judges at that point, and they kept calling down to Charlie because it was you had to manipulate the photo finish. You had to put it on a line, and this went on for 10 minutes. Move it a little further, move it a little further back, move it a little further. And then they finally got frustrated and they gave up, and we didn't hear anything more. And they finally decided to consult the rule book, which was very complicated at the time. And they declared a winner at that time based on standing and summary. But, you'll never forget where you were when those two horses hit the wire, including the great call from Tom Durkin, who, for many years has said that was his most exciting moment in horse racing. It wasn't a thoroughbred moment. It was the dead heat Hambletonian, as Gary will attest to. So, it just makes you wonder. Through our Breeders' Crown segment, we really didn't get to talk about that guy. The guy who's the all-time leading trainer, Jimmy Takter. We should certainly give him some due. I know he's now retired, but he he's still involved. He still tweets. He still does all of this. And, Malabar Man, that was another, special moment in history for him. 1997. Wow, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, and, right up until, the last couple of years, the drama continues when it comes to the Crown. There's a different storyline every year. And it's just so much fun to watch it play out and be a part of it the last couple of years. Final photograph we're going to look at. 2 years ago, I got the call from Moira to help out with the CBS broadcast, and the thrill of a lifetime for me. And I'm sure you guys felt the same way in your early days of doing this, and still do, I'm sure. It's just incredible. And you guys were wonderful, both of you, Dave and Gary, to help me and really make sure I was prepared for the show. And it's incredible. And maybe, Gary, talk about that. I mean, do you still get as excited as ever when Hambo Day rolls around and we're going to be on the network?
I mean, I absolutely do, but I'm glad that I've been able to finally, corral some of that excitement because, at the beginning, when I was first asked to do this, and that included the Breeders' Crown, working on ESPN or working doing the Hambletonian on CBS, there was a period at the beginning where I almost wanted to jump out of my own skin. I was excited, but it was a very nerve-wracking time until the actual day arrived, and then you just soak it in, you drink it in, and you become a part of the festivities. And the thing that I always say to myself, or at least did over those years where I felt I needed to calm myself down a little bit, was, you know what? It's been a good run. If this is your last show, it's been fun. You're here. You've done it. And that's a little bit of a calming factor. But as you get involved in the show and things start to happen, the really positive adrenaline starts to flow. And working with guys like Dave Brower, having somebody like Moira Fanning there for whatever you need, particularly in the truck during the show, getting information, the first dead heat, the only disqualification, win disqualification. Nobody ever expected that. And so I said to we were in a commercial break. I think Dave, it was me and Dave at the time, and we were in a commercial break. And I said to the truck, and I was hoping Moira was there, this is the only disqualification from the win ever, right? And I got that answer right back. Yes, that's it. And that, that's what you need. You need to know that stuff. And Moira was there to supply that for me. I couldn't think of any other time, but maybe there was, and I didn't know about it. But the support team is unbelievable. And if I can just take a second, Greg, to say that you came in a few years ago, and your performances have been seamless. I mean, you've been a tremendous addition to the Hambletonian broadcast. I know that Dave feels the same way. I think we make a really good team. Everything is covered. And, it's just been a pleasure for me. This past Hambletonian was my 27th consecutive year doing that. And I'm honored,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm sure you feel the same way, and maybe just talk about that, being able to work with a guy like Gary for all these years covering the biggest race in the sport.
I tell you what, there's no better partner for me than Gary. And, this started for us when we debuted the Drive Time show on TVG. He was in the studio in Los Angeles with Dave Weaver. I was in the press box at the Meadowlands. It was an immediate hit. Everybody listened, everybody watched, everybody followed. It was a great partnership. When I sit next to Gary on that Hambletonian set, and, Greg, I don't have to tell you this, and Moira, obviously, I don't have to tell you this, live TV on national network is a special thing. There's a certain amount of pressure and adrenaline that goes. But when we're doing it live, after we've done a couple of rehearsals, Gary will look over at me as we're with 30 seconds to air, and he'll give me a fist bump, and he'll say, let's have a good show. And then I know I'm good. We're good, and that's what we do. It's a special moment. I think we've delivered some unbelievable broadcasts over the last several years under interesting conditions. Phillies against Colts. DQs. The DQ, which I'm sure you're going to show a little bit later on, was one of our moments. We were about 5 minutes to black, at the end of the show, and the inquiry sign is still out there, and Gary and I are looking at each other and looking at our watches, and we're like, are we going to get this in? We didn't know. Yeah. And the judges, I found out later on, John Tomasella and his crew, they're not watching our broadcast. They mute everything. They don't listen to anything. So they didn't actually think about our show being off the air in 2 minutes. So you want to talk about pressure, but the communication that goes back and forth between me and Gary and the truck and everybody, let's do this. Let's show this. I will explain it. I will explain it as best I can. And I think we did a pretty good job. I really do. Gary, do you agree?
Yeah, I absolutely do. It's absolutely a 100% a team effort. And it's just the three of us. Whoever's in front of the camera, as I said, we have a tremendous support system here. The job that the Hambletonian Society Breeders' Crown does on providing the information that we need is it's unequaled. It's just unbelievable stuff that I could access today online if I wanted to, which I did as we got prepared for the show today. And it's been that way since day one. And Moira can take a lot of that credit because she's been the one that has put together most of that information over the years with her staff. But she was the one that always spearheaded it. And it makes all the difference in the world. You need to know that stuff, because if you don't, people will know that, you haven't prepared for the show. And that is something that we never have to worry about information-wise, because it's always there available for us. Everything is there, and it's all comes from that machine, the Hambletonian Society Breeders' Crown. The time that we get to spend those 90 minutes on the air are so precious. It goes by so quickly. It's beyond belief. But I couldn't ask for a better partner in Dave Brower. You have done a great job, Greg. And the years before that, all the people that I have worked with over the years, especially the years it was on the mothership, CBS, people like Gus Johnson and Andrea Joyce and Mike Joy and all these people. I mean, they are. What's that?
Donna Brothers.
Who else?
Donna Brothers.
Oh yes, Donna Brothers. Yeah, but Donna is obviously a horse person. She's a former jockey. And Donna did a great job on horseback. But the people from CBS, professional broadcasters all the way, but they leaned on me heavily because they didn't have horse knowledge, and it made it a little bit tougher. But in a sense, I kind of welcomed having the industry look to me at that time to provide the necessary information. Over all the years, it's been a great ride. And you guys, when I work with you guys, it's a piece of cake because you are horse racing people.
Well, I remember my first Hambletonian live, 1996, and again, I think I've been lucky, very fortunate over the years. When I've had a first for a major event, it seems to be something epic, and that was the year of Continental Victory, and it would have been the first year that I would have met Moira at that time, working at Freehold Raceway. A young intern working with me, Eric Offenberg, his father David, of course, a co-owner of Continental Victory. So to be there and celebrate that year with them in the winner's circle, fellow PEI native Wally Hennessy had a drive that year in the final with Running C. So it was one of the great efforts, in my opinion, in Hambletonian history. It was the filly beating the boys. And here's John Bothy with the call, and we'll talk more about this one in a moment.
Lindy Lane and O'Donnell right there, stalking the leader in second. Tony Oakes on the outside third. O'Donnell will look to shake loose from the pocket, but now surging up 3 wide. Here comes Moiseyev with Kramer Boy trying to get into it. That's Running C in fourth. But O'Donnell now has pulled the pocket. 3/4, 1:25-1. 3/16 to go, and they're on their way home. It's Continental Victory with the lead. Lindy Lane attacks on the outside. Then it's another 2-back to Running C. But it's a dramatic 2-horse battle. Continental Victory, the filly on the inside for a chance. On the outside, Lindy Lane and O'Donnell as they hit the wire. Continental Victory has done it. She wins the Cadillac Hambletonian in 1:52-4.
One of the most beautiful gates I have ever seen for a trotter, and Dave Brower, you would have been there that day watching as well, and perhaps even working there at that point in time. And when you watch that race again, I've watched it so many times, and I thought turning for home that day, even though I'm cheering for Continental Victory, there's no way she can hold off Lindy Lane with this trip. Pretty remarkable how she dug in.
Well, again, it's a moment of where you were. I was standing at the rail of the second level of the press box at the Meadowlands, and I had some giant trifecta tickets. So this is a little bit of a bad beat betting story. And I don't even know, because I got aggravated. I may have had like $100 straight trifecta if Lindy Lane had gone by. You didn't have time to have any savers, but one of the fillies that was in there, I forget her name at the moment, she broke behind the gate. So I still had a little time to bet. We had a personal teller in the press box. So I was betting like $50 and $100 trifectas. Lindy Lane to Continental Victory to Running C. So, I would have made a big score if he went by, and they hit the wire, and I just shook my head, as I've had to shake my head many, many times in betting stories, and that was it. But what a tremendous, unbelievable individual she was. I always look forward to having Ron Gerfine, her trainer, talk about, her season and that day and how good she was, and she would never give up and things like that. So, even though I didn't come out on top that day, it's one of the most memorable ones, that I've ever been a part of. I wasn't on the broadcast then, but I was just in the press box doing charts and things like that. But it was an epic battle of two champions, and the filly beat the boy.
And when the filly's in the race, Moira, and especially when they have the credentials of a Continental victory in recent years in Atlanta, how much does that change the impact in terms of promoting the Hambletonian when you get a great filly in there taking on the boys?
It's always that extra hook and extra interest. And I'll just say, Dave, I think that was Active Grace, and there were
Active Grace, that's right.
yeah, there was still heat racing, and it was live on, I don't know or live on CBS. So imagine live television. Heat racing is not for live television. There's delays. There's you don't know who's coming back for the final. You've got to set everything up. Then I think Active Grace caused 1 or 2 recalls. I don't remember, but it was just it was the tempers were flaring, fraying. You name it. And Continental Victory's performance, everyone, it was just so amazing that given else that had happened that day, she was oblivious to it. And the way she flagged her tail and trotted, and of course that's another iconic image of her from the inside rail with the 2 horses neck and neck. Actually, we had 2 pretty good fillies in the race then. In the early years of the Hambletonians, fillies won it pretty regularly. I can't tell you why that is, but I guess because there wasn't a Hambletonian Oaks, so there wasn't a reason to avoid going in the Hambletonian. That was the biggest purse. If you had a good trotter, in you went. But when we had Mission Brief a couple of years ago, even the New York Times did a story, and they've very hard to get them to focus on anything harness racing. But it's intriguing. It's extra need if you need one for the Hambletonian, but for a filly to cross over and try to take on the male counterparts for the big race, and Atlanta doing it, she wasn't quite as, I don't think she came into the race quite with the credentials of a Continental victory. Didn't matter. And again, she also had heats to contend with, had that crazy first heat, and so it's a great story. It's when they can do it. As I said, I always root for them to do it, but I understand why trainers opt for the Oaks instead of. It takes a lot out of a horse, especially with the heat racing. There's no easy racing when you're at that level. So there's a lot of races to go in the year, and I don't blame them for not doing it, but we love it when they do it.
And Canadian connections have fared well in the race in the last couple of years, especially. But even before that, there have been many Canadian connected horses that have won the Hambletonian. And this is one that I picked out the year 2000. And it's a year that Trottin' Trevor Ritchie got it done with a horse named Yankee Paco, son of Balanced Image. And at this time, the first Canadian sired horse ever to win the Hambletonian. So this was really, I think, a big moment, especially for Canadian harness racing. And maybe ask you, Dave, when a guy like Trevor Ritchie came into town, and the guys locally maybe didn't know as much about him as a driver, how did you approach that?
Well, all of the good drivers, and especially we have, the top drivers colony in all of North America, in my opinion, they all knew who Trevor Ritchie was, and they knew this was a horse that, needed to be thought of. Well, they were coming to the gate to just see all those people on the apron there, just to give you an idea. Like Gary would tell you, we'd regularly have crowds of 30, 40,000 people on Hambletonian Day. But, this is certainly another great field. I mean, you'll see the names. You Had a Dream, that's Canadian Connections, that's Dan Dubé. Legendary Lover, that's Dwayne Miner. But let's pick it up from the half here in the call and just enjoy, because this was certainly a big upset.
Charge. Legendary Lover, K to the front. You Had a Dream is now second. And now first over and attacking is Yankee Paco. Trevor Ritchie getting into it now, third on the outside as they pass the half. Getting shoveled back now, Dream Master into fourth as they pass the half mile. And getting into it now is Fast Photo. He is second over and getting a good trip. as they race on past the half. And the halftime was 55-2, and they're on the far turn. And it's Legendary Lover K. Legendary Lover K is the one to knock off here as they race past three-quarters. Yankee Paco takes dead aim and applies pressure on the outside. On the inside, You Had a Dream. That's Fast Photo up second over. Dream Master needs some racing room. Monty Hall's right there in the thick of the action. Ray Schnitger with Armbro trick to the far outside. Credit Winner trying to do it from far out of it. 125 at three-quarters. Some great driving by Dwayne Miner, but Legendary Lover K doesn't have it, and it's Yankee Paco to the front. Yankee Paco has it. Fast Photo has dead aim on the outside. Armbro trick is trying to close in, and Credit Winner on the outside with a late rally. They're in the stretch of the Hamiltonian. Yankee Paco. It will be Yankee Paco, the first Canadian-sired winner. Balanced Image. Trevor Ritchie, 153-2. Credit Winner was up for second.
So the Big Chestnut becomes the first Canadian-sired winner of the Hamble, the son of the great Balanced Image. This is before Cadabra's time, so he was the greatest trotting stallion in Canadian history up to that point. And there's the happy caretaker and Trevor Ritchie. As cool as a cucumber on the sport's biggest stage. Quite a moment for him.
What a drive, too. You know, that was not the easiest trip that he had. And if you watched him, you know, driving the horse through the stretch, I think he reached up and, like, showed him the whip once. That's how strong he was trotting through the stretch. And, you know, Credit Winner's effort to come up and get second for Jim Martinez from China, basically, you know, was another incredible effort, and what a great sire he turned out to be. So every year the Hambletonian, even sometimes if you don't win it, it produces great sires. It continues our tradition and our sport, and, you know, many great horses to come. It's always an amazing field. And, you know, you look back to these races from years ago and you realize just how good these horses were. You really do.
Yeah. And one of my favorite Hambletonians was from the year 2005, Moira, a year where Roger Hammer had his moment in the spotlight. And, you know, a well-regarded horseman over the years, but, you know, you rarely saw him on the biggest stage like the Hambletonian. But to win it that day, how special was that edition?
Oh, just incredible. I mean, Roger, very popular guy, you know, very, very good horseman, and you know, but not someone that we saw in the top Grand Circuit races that often anymore. And I think he'd raced the horse in the Pennsylvania Fairs. But you know what? He had staked that horse to the Hambletonian right along and believed he was a good horse, and was determined to get there. And he did that. And same with Yankee Paco. Those horses kind of came from San Domingo Hall. We didn't see them race up to the race at the Meadowlands and in the locale. They came from a different kind of campaign. And so you don't know that much about them. You haven't seen them race the other horses. That's the beauty of it, I think. And it was just a terrific, probably one of the most popular wins in the last 10 years. I do remember the eliminations were the week before. CBS was there shooting B-roll and stuff for the show the next week. Roger had won his elimination, and producer said, "Can you go back and get him? You know, we want to set up a feature to do with him and, you know, with the horse, and we want to get him on camera now and ask him a couple questions." I said, "Sure." So I called Roger. I said, "Roger," and this was literally maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes after the elimination. I said, "Roger," he answered the phone. I said, "Roger, you know, where are you? We want to bring the camera crew back." And he said, "I'm at exit 12 on the New Jersey Turnpike. I'm going home." So we had to send a crew out to the Bedford, PA to get what we needed. But that was a very, very popular win. And I think that's what these races are all about. Everybody wants to believe they can win them. They want to have the chance to win them. And more often than not, they can do it. We saw it with Stefan Melander and Scarlet Knight. We saw it with Mal and Malabar Man. You know, you can't, as Hervé would say, you can't win it if you're not in it. They think you got the horse, bring them on. And that's what Roger did.
So this was 15 years ago, back in 2005. A look back to that year's Hambletonian, an off-the-pace win for Vivid Photo.
$1.5 million. And they're off and trotting off stride. Mr. Dream OM, and gunning out is self-professed, looking to show early speed there. Strong Yankee. He aborted a leave attempt there. He looks to be reined in. Muscle Memory protects rail position as the Catman moves him up on the outside, and he is sparring early with self-professed. A gap of 2 to Strong Yankee in the 3rd position. Racino got away well in 4th. Northern Ensign is 5th to the opening quarter. The favorite, Classic Photo, is 6th. And in a surprise move, Vivid Photo is 7th near the back of the pack. That one is followed by Muscle Bound, getting down and dirty, and after an early break, Mr. Dream OM caught the field. They're single file. The first quarter was pretty quick, 27 seconds. And down the back stretch they go. And it's the Catman who looks over his shoulder, and on the outside he sees Brian Sears with Strong Yankee making a backside brush to the front. Strong Yankee will take over as they head towards the half mile. Now Muscle Memory back in the 2nd spot. Self-Professed is 3rd. Racino is 4th on the inside. Northern Ensign is 5th. That one followed by Classic Photo, looking to track Northern Ensign, who commits to the outside. And that one will be followed by Vivid Photo. He is backed up now, 3rd over, and he'll have a long way to come. Then it's getting down and dirty. Muscle Bound as excess cover. 2 lengths to Mr. Dream OM. The half was 55, so a breather of 28 seconds there for Strong Yankee. Strong Yankee looking pretty strong there on the far turn. Tough first over for Northern Ensign. Stride for stride with Muscle Memory. The Catman working out a perfect trip here so far. And on the outside, here comes a Classic Photo with Ron Pierce. He's tracked all the way by Vivid Photo. Roger Hammer is stalking Ron Pierce, and fans to the outside full of trot. 124. They're in the stretch of the Hambletonian. Strong Yankee, and they're looking to swarm in. Classic Photo. Vivid Photo on the outside. Out of the pocket. Muscle Memory. 3 across the track in deep stretch. It's Vivid Photo on the outside, and he's home free for Roger Hammer. From the Pennsylvania Fairs to the Hambletonian Winner's Circle, it's Vivid Photo. Vivid Photo upsets Classic Photo. Muscle Memory 3rd. 152-3. 52-3.
An electrifying off-the-pace win that day. A very happy Roger Hammer as we get another low-angle shot of the finish, and you see Roger with the whip up in the air. Dave Brower, from your perspective, as a handicapper doing morning lines, when you get a race like this in the biggest stage, and a guy like Roger who drives himself, driving against all the top catch drivers of the day, adds a different element, doesn't it?
You could say that again. I think I got the morning line mostly right, but I certainly didn't get the handicapping right that day. He was not in my top couple of picks there. But, you give credit where it's due. The horse was a lot better than I thought he would be. He came from a pretty tough spot, too, and he outkicked a couple of very, very good horses there. So, I remember earlier in the week when, the CBS crew was starting to come on in, and I think that might have been one of the years that Donna Brothers was there. And, she came up to me and she said, well, what about this Vivid Photo horse? And I always remember what I told her. I said, well, he really hasn't raced against anything, and I don't think he can win. So I was dead wrong, but it just goes to show you how sometimes you can be 100% wrong, and that's horse racing. That's just the name of it. There's the placard. That was at the top of the front paddock of the old grandstand at the Meadowlands that they used to have each and every winter every year. And, that was an unbelievable time. I was wrong, but, sometimes we take it and we roll on.
You're right. We've all been guilty of underestimating a horse, but sometimes you're happy to be wrong because you feel good for the connections, and a guy like Roger Hammer with a long career that he's had in the game, it was nice to see him have that moment for sure. Generational horses, Gary, they don't come along very often, and that's why they are indeed generational horses. But back in 2008, 2009. We were fortunate to see Some Beach Somewhere come along, Dewey Cheatham and Howe the same year, and then a youngster that was starting to emerge on the trotting side named Muscle Hill. Set the scene for his Hambletonian. It almost seemed like a foregone conclusion that year that nobody could beat him.
Yeah, it pretty much did for trainer Greg Peck. He had all the confidence in the world. And, of course, he had a top driver as well. You go from 2005 and Roger Hammer, the small guy, at least when you're on the biggest stage. I mean, Roger had a lot of success on his circuit for many, many years. But then when he came to the Hambletonian stage, it was, he was the little guy and he got the job done. Muscle Hill, the exact opposite, basically royalty right from the get-go. I believe he lost his first career start by a mere neck or whatever it was ahead, and that was it for him. He didn't lose after that. He was an unbelievable animal. I think possibly the greatest trotter I've ever seen. People then start to think, well, maybe the crop wasn't all that strong. I don't think that was it. I just think he was a freak, and he was dominant in every way. And when it came to the 2009 Hambletonian, it pretty much was a foregone conclusion. He didn't let anybody down.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a look back at that now. And no anxious moments on this day with Brian Sears in the driver's seat, 1-5. You don't see that too often in the Hambo final as well, but he certainly lived up to all the hype.
Right there, a tighter second. Symphonic in over third. Here comes Triumphant Caviar. He's first over on the outside, about 4 lengths from the lead. Cal Chips Brood is locked in on the inside. Then the Chancellor and Federal Flex third over, and Muscle Hill opens up to a 2-length lead. Explosive Matter looking to trot with him in second as they come past 3/4, 1:23 flat. Muscle Hill looking to take him all the way at the top of the stretch. Explosive Matter now with 2.5 lengths to make up is chasing in second, 1/8 of a mile from the wire, and it is Muscle Hill who's striding clear for Brian Sears. Explosive Matter is racing in second, Symphonic in over third, Muscle Hill drawing away with every stride. Operation Hambletonian complete. It's Muscle Hill 150-1, equaling the world record.
And always awesome to listen back to the great Sam McKee with the call. Operation Hambletonian complete. I think he really encapsulated it perfectly, Gary. And really it was an operation. From the time he dominated his 2-year-old campaign, they had their sights set on this afternoon, and he could not have performed any better. And it looks like he's become a game changer in the stallion barn as well.
Yeah, that's he went from racetrack greatness to the breeding shed greatness, and there are a couple things about that. Witnessing a true great champion like that, and then hearing this brilliant race call from our late dear friend Sam McKee. I mean, we have heard many brilliant calls from Ken Workington. This one now becomes so much more special because it's Sam, and Sam no longer with us. And then, of course, calling probably one of the greatest Hambletonians. And I still believe it is the stakes mark, 150-1.
Yeah, just an incredible performance. Watching champions, I mean, it's not much of a race in terms of drama, but it is fun to watch a great horse just simply do their thing. And we did that with him. We did it, as mentioned, with Some Beach Somewhere at that time, and even Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe was kind of in that same territory right around that same time. But it's amazing when you think about the race. There are certain connections that seem to win the race every second year. There are other connections that you would have expected by now would have a Hambletonian trophy and their mantle, and they don't, and it's amazing. And one of them is the tandem of Ron Burke and Dave Miller. And take us back to 2017, Dave Brower. What the Hill wins the race. The pocket trip, everything works out beautifully. It's the first Hambletonian victory for the trainer and driver. And then the inquiry sign goes up. What's going on?
Well, I'll tell you what, that was, that was such an incredible, adrenaline moment, I guess is the best way to say it. And I picked this race because I knew Gary wouldn't pick it, and I knew Moira wouldn't pick it, because it's a disqualification, whether you liked it or not or whatever. But when they turned for home in the Hambletonian a couple of years ago, and What the Hill angled out of that pocket spot in very tight quarters, and there was clear contact with Jason Bartlett's horse. He stepped in the wheel of What the Hill, as we showed many, many times while we were, broadcasting it. Here it is, as you can see. Now, no one will argue that there's contact, okay? Now, whether Dave Miller had sufficient clearance or not, that was up to the judges to decide. Look at Dave, look over. He felt it, he heard it, he knew it. So I can't even imagine what he was thinking to himself. They come back, for the celebratory photo. The inquiry is on the board. We've got 3 or 4 minutes until the end of the show, and we're trying to explain this, to the folks who may not watch harness racing all that often, but there's clear contact. So, I was implying, inferring while Gary and I were talking live on the air that, this is pretty bad. There might be a disqualification. And then the look on Ronnie Burke's face when the board went blank and Ken Workington came on the PA and says, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? There has been a disqualification, for the first time in the 93-year history of this race, the sport's most important race. There's no bigger moment of doing journalism and broadcasting than that. And, yes, I feel bad for the connections and Dave Miller and whatever, but I know one thing, and people have asked me this for years. If I was John Tomasella, who was the presiding judge at that moment and made the decision, I would have disqualified the horse.
Greg, I was looking right at Ron Burke and Dave Miller. They were hanging out by the starting gate there, waiting, and then they were looking at the board. And when Ken Workington made the announcement, for one brief moment, Ron Burke just took his foot and he was standing on the track. He kind of kicked up a little dirt on the Meadowlands racetrack and just kind of turned away. And that you could feel the disappointment for him and Dave Miller at that moment. It was so palpable. It was unbelievable. Imagine having that happen to you in a race that had never seen that happen before, and it's the biggest race in the sport, in the entire sport globally. I can't imagine the feeling, but I kind of got an idea just by looking at his reaction the moment those words came out of Ken Workington's mouth. It was amazing.
Understandable. And Moira, pretty amazing to think that, it was the first time this had happened in the history. And then we see what happened last year in the Kentucky Derby. It's just kind of incredible how we go, decades without something like this happening. And then here it is. But from your perspective, what do you recall about those moments when you knew this was going to happen?
Well, this is why you can never race with a big event, because you think, oh, this is, going to go by the book and nothing's going to happen. And you have live TV, and even the most mundane or casual of circumstances, it's a big event. The trainers have their horses as best as they can. The drivers feel the pressure. This is, for $1 million, or it's a Breeders' Cradle or a Meadowlands. Things happen that you would never expect to happen in a race like this. So you can never relax about it. You had back to the first dead heat. If you'll remember, that year was to have been the Valley Victory Peace Corps confrontation. And it was a Hambletonian hold my beer moment. We were left with this somewhat, lost the stars, lost the luster. Here's a 2-horse race off, giant yawn. Oh, it's a dead heat, and that we could dine out on for the next 20 years. And same thing with the DQ. It's a big race. People the pressure is on, the screws are down, and What the Hill, I think, is probably one of the best prepared horses I'd seen to win that race. He was in a position to win it. He was trained in great condition to win it. I think his shoes were pulled. There was so much confidence surrounding Ron and the horse. He had his horse great and ready to go. Had David Miller, and the tiniest, of an inch, had Guardian Angel's hoof miss the wheel. I'm not sure anything would have happened, but that second of contact, knocked Guardian Angel off stride, and that drew all the attention to the hit and the etc. So you just never can relax when those horse races. You never know You know, it could be just an ordinary race. It could be a dead heat. It could be a DQ. I do remember I had gone to a conference up in Saratoga, primarily thoroughbred, and that's all anybody wanted to ask me about. You have DQ'd a horse in the Hambletonian? You DQ'd the winner. And last year when I was there, the woman that runs the judging school said, you know, we use that in all of our, we use that footage. And I was like, yeah, great. Yeah, so bitter moment, I'm sure, for both Dave and the owners and you know, Ron Burke. It's not going to be their last chance to win. I'm sure we'll see them there very soon.
Absolutely. One more race we want to look at, one final Hambletonian replay, and we'll go to last year. And Dave Brower, maybe get you to set the scene for us. This was supposed to be the day we coronated Green Shoe as the Hambo champion.
Well, you know what? We had trainer Marcus Melander, who is 22 now, or 23, I forget which, who had his dream team of trotters getting ready to go. And Green Shoe was widely regarded as the top of the trio, so to speak, and he was a big, heavy favorite. But we all know Green Shoe has had his little issues of behaving on the racetrack. And, you know, when you have to race twice in a day, and, you know, when it's hot and there are a lot of people and there's a lot of noise, you know, basically anything can happen. And Green Shoe somehow came up just a little bit short on that particular day, but I don't want to take any credit away from the winner, because it's Canadian connections and some grand connections as well. One of the great trotting trainers in Luc Blais, you know, and determination, Serge Godin, who's been such a wonderful owner in the sport, and one of the monster rising star drivers in our sport, Bob McClure, who put on a perfect steer. So, you know, let's watch how that unfolded, and, you know, it was just a tremendous finish.
Fashion on the inside and Soul Strong. First quarter was sharp, 26-1. Marseille on the engine out of second. Pilot Discretion. Andrew McCarthy takes over across the backstretch. Green Manalishi and Tim Tetrick tightening in from third towards the half. Forbidden Trade edging to the outside, fourth. Looking to follow him is Green Shoe underway, fifth on the outside now as they have passed the half. Then it's Osterch on the inside. Osterch is followed by a Cantab Fashion stride for stride with Don't Let Him. And then it's Chimpanzee and Soul Strong, the half up in 55 seconds, rated half mile here. Pilot Discretion in front. Green Manalishi now sticks a long neck in front. He forces the issue with Forbidden Trade right there on the outside, but he has stalled. Marseille is pinned in fourth now, and forced three wide. Green Shoe needs to get going here, and he's floundering on the rim at this point as they pass three quarters in 1:23 and 2, and it's Green Manalishi who leads them home in the Hambletonian. Green Manalishi, and fighting back, Pilot Discretion has more. Marseille on the inside. Forbidden Trade looking for a huge upset. Here comes Green Shoe, unleashed by Brian Sears. Green Shoe with a sharp stretch kick, and he's drawing clear, fighting back. Forbidden Trade on the inside. Green Shoe, Forbidden Trade with a gigantic upset. Forbidden Trade. Green Shoe flying late was Chimpanzee, and Soul Strong 151.
Well, Gary, I thought going into the day that Forbidden Trade had a chance to get a good chunk of that purse check, but I certainly didn't see him upending Green Shoe when the day began, and frankly didn't see it going into the final. But Dave talked about Bob McClure, and I think a good indication of that race, as you watched it unfold, he's gapping his cover going into that last turn, where maybe a lesser driver would have panicked a little bit and thought, you know, I've got to start getting after my horse. He just sort of let the top horses come back to him and got the measured win.
Well, you know, and I think Dave will, you know, confirm this from where we were sitting. Green Shoe, as Dave pointed out, the heat, the big crowd, he was definitely hot, and you could tell he was agitated behind the gate. He was throwing his head. He just didn't look the composed, relaxed Green Shoe that when he is and he's on his game, he is pretty much unbeatable. But right from the get-go, I think Brian had to be concerned about that, because I know that he was, in fact, trying to keep this horse calm and settle down. And I think that was his undoing on Hambletonian Day. And whereas Bob McClure, and Brian was as cool as a cucumber, and Bob McClure, same way, he was as well, rose to the occasion. I think Green Shoe really kind of got himself beat there because of his behavior on that, hot, humid day with a lot of people on hand. He didn't look comfortable at all behind the gate both times.
Yeah. Of course, later in the year went on to be a dominant force in the division. And Marcus Melander, we talked about him coming in. It looked like his Hambletonian to lose. Didn't work out on the day, but Moira, I get the impression we'll see Marcus in the Hambo winner circle sooner rather than later. What do you think?
Absolutely. And he had 3 horses in that race. I mean, it's just unheard of. And I did hear, I think Green Manalicia and Oster both won races Saturday in Sweden, and they're in the big races next weekend. He's a top conditioner of horses, of course, the nephew of Stefan Melander, who won with Scarlet Knight. And I do believe that somewhere in that pedigree page, that family tree, is a trotter.
Maybe ask the 3 of you. Let's start to dream a little bit to when stakes racing gets back into swing across North America. If you've maybe got a particular horse you're looking forward to coming back this year and watching back in action, Dave, we'll start with you on that one.
Well, I'll tell you what, and like Gary said, in kind of preparing a couple of notes for the show tonight, I always treasure our harness racing rivalries. And we've got, every year we seem to have 1, sometimes 2. Well, we've got a couple of really good ones that are coming back. Amongst the 2-year-old pacing colts from last year, the wars between Poppy Rob Hanover and Tall Dark Stranger, we don't have to tell you that. And it involved another DQ and the Breeders' Crown and things like that. But both of these horses are coming back to their full potential from what my sources tell me. They look great. They're ready to go. You and I both know, the Glamour Boy Wars, it's a long year. It's a lot of races. They go very fast. Who are the true survivors? We will see, but that is something to look forward to. And then in the aged distaff pacing mare division, we've got Horse of the Year, Sharton, and we've got Caviar Alley. And that was a little subject of, some, interesting stuff, why, Sharton got beat in her last several starts. Caviar Alley finally beat her or whatever, but they're both coming back. And, it can only set the precipice for what should be a wonderful year of them competing against each other in every state, in every track, on every, and all size tracks and things like that. So as long as they stay sound and healthy, those are the rivalries that I look forward to and I enjoy talking about on the air at the Meadowlands and at the Red Mile and at the Little Brown Jug if they show up. So that's my job, and I can't wait to do it.
Awesome. Gary, what about you?
I'll just keep it short. I think the 2-year-old pacing colt Poppy Rob Hanover is going to be extremely tough. I think this is going to be a horse that's going to have a sensational 3-year-old season. I'm looking forward to that. And I agree with Dave also. Caviar Alley got the best of Sharton at the end of the year. I think she's going to come back even stronger. I think she could be at the head of her class this coming season, whenever that is.
And Moira, we'll throw the same question to you.
Yeah, I was going to take the pacing mares too, but because they've, I can remember in Breeders' Crown years when we've had 5 mares, 6 mares. We've had a tough time getting a field of open mares because the good ones always got bred or didn't keep their form from year to year. But in the last 6 years, the open mares have just been tremendously up their game, and watching Sharton and another year, I always look forward to that, and Caviar Alley and the new ones that are coming on too. But I'm also eager to see the trotting mares, Atlanta, Manchego. They are, as they get older and more mature, I think they've been managed to not still have a whole lot of trot in them, a whole lot of competition in them. I just hope we get to it. Okay.
We've got another
Well,
handicapper joining us.
the
Yeah,
diva.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is the diva. She came from Mark Ford's barn. She resides here along with Toby, who came from the Tyler, Todd, and Amber Buter barn. Two wonderful cats, and they keep me company during this incredible time.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. Well, before we wrap up tonight, guys, we want to recap our trivia questions and as well the poll question that we posed at the top of the show. We'll start, I believe, with the poll question. Yes, which is the greatest Breeders' Crown champion of all time? We gave 3 options to choose from: Peace Corps, Mac Lobel, Jenna's Beach Boy, or other. And other was the top choice. 33% of you thought someone other than those 3 would be rated as the greatest Breeders' Crown champion of all time. But pretty close, as you can see. Peace Corps, she was the winningest horse in the history of the Breeders' Crown Series, the only 4-time champion. As we recap our trivia questions, and we want to thank you for submitting your answers tonight. Which horse has the most appearances in a Breeders' Crown final? Well, the answer was Arch Madness. Raced in 7 Breeders' Crown finals and won his first ever Crown appearance in the 3-year-old Colt Trot back in 2007. Our second question: Tactor, Burke, and McIntosh are the top 3 money-winning trainers in Breeders' Crown history. Can you name who sits 4th? Well, the answer is Chuck Sylvester, and also a great record over the years in the Hambletonian, of course. He has 13 Crown trophies and a little more than $5.2 million to his credit in the Breeders' Crown Series. And the last trivia question: name the only horse to win 4 Breeders' Crown titles. We talked about it during the show, and there it is. Peace Corps. We saw her 2-year-old filly championship back in '88. She won again in '89 in the 3-year-old division, and twice as an older mare in 1990 and 1992. What an incredible record. We will draw one name at random, and we will advise the winner on the Facebook page of tonight's trivia contest. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in once again this evening. Big thank you, guys, for joining us tonight and going a little bit long on time. We really, really appreciate it. Glad to see you're all doing well. I know, Gary, you've got a long drive ahead of you tomorrow. You've been packing your place.
Yep.
You're making a move.
Making a move back to Nevada from California. You know, we stayed here. Cal Expo, the last day of racing was March 31st. We were supposed to race on April 1st, and we had been approved to race Tuesday and Wednesday through the end of April. That, of course, went by the wayside. We've been here since then. It's time to go home, and we've got 11 hours in front of us tomorrow. We normally stop midway point about Bakersfield, California, but we're not really feeling all that comfortable about staying at hotels and sleeping on bedding that other people are. Just doesn't sound good to us right now. So I've got to get tough, and I've got to, we've got to start early tomorrow and just get through 11 hours. Yeah, so the whole idea is not a really fun idea, but once we get there, it'll be okay. But it's been a long haul the last couple of weeks, anyhow.
Well, you can do it. We've got faith. We want to wish you safe travels. And again, guys, I hope we're all going to get reunited this summer on Hambletonian Day. And we'll find out more about that, I'm sure, in the coming days. And again, thanks again, and all the best.
Hey, Greg, thanks for the trip down memory lane. Really a lot of fun. Glad, very, very happy to be part of the broadcast tonight. I think we all had fun, and we can all hang our hat on some of our greatest memories in our sport that we so much treasure.
Yep.
Good stuff. We'll do it again, and we will be back with another edition of COSA TV this coming Wednesday night. We've got another fun show lined up for you. Ann Stratman of Sealster Farms here in nearby Lucan, Ontario, and Dr. Bridget Jablonski of Hanover Shoe Farms. Of course, the greatest name in harness racing. She will join us as well. So that's this coming Wednesday night, again, a 7:30 start time. Reminder to Ontario horse people of that very important deadline tomorrow. Do not miss it. Deadline to submit your applications for relief funding is midnight tomorrow night, and visit Ontario Racing. COSA Online or Standardbred Canada to find out more and download your application forms. Until next time, enjoy yourselves, stay healthy, and have a good night.
COSA, the Central Ontario Standardbred Association, proudly serving Ontario horse people with integrity and accountability. Collaborative, supportive, helping to ensure a vibrant harness racing industry. Lifetime membership is free and there are many benefits. Become a new member today. COSA, representing the interests of horse people racing at Ontario racetracks. To find out more, visit cosaonline.com.